Good morning. So there's still just a little piece to read from yesterday's chapter. Then I'm going to continue with chapter number 2 of the book Exploring Freedom by Vimala Thakar. We began by examining various implications of the words totality and living, and we concluded by referring to the first step of self-education. People the world over believe that discipline and self-education are not necessary. They think that you listen to words, you understand, and then life changes. If only it could happen that way. Unless there is an inner order established on the physical and the psychological level, the feeling that one has understood evaporates before one is even able to say to oneself, I have understood. The understanding has to be contained in this body and this mind. It is not like understanding the meaning of a word in the Oxford Dictionary. It has to be actually embodied and lived. It is only when one is totally committed to life and living, only when life and living do not have an ulterior material motive, but provide their own fulfillment, that one can call oneself a religious person. Chapter 2, or the second talk, silence. The brain contains conditioned energy, which we call the mind. As a very complex organ incorporated in the body, the brain contains conditioned energy consciousness, which is used for contacting the known, looking at the known, and relating with it. The known is that which has been discovered, analyzed, and capitalized by our forebears. We have words that describe or define it, and what we call education introduces us to this vast area of the human known and human experience. The brain gets in touch with a word which describes an object. Then we search our memory and say, I understand. It is the intellectual acquisition of a word describing objective reality. So it is only possible to get into touch with reality indirectly. The brain gets in touch with the symbol, the word that represents a concept. We're trying to reach the unknown, psychological, invisible world in the same way. This intellectual way of knowing is very useful. It would not be possible to handle such things as the physical sciences, technology, or engineering without it. This kind of education and training is needed for the brain to recognize symbols for what they are, to recognize the conceptual world that mankind has built systematically upon perceptual reality. As the totality of life is not limited to the visible, it is also not limited to the invisible. There seems to be a much vaster area of life which has neither been described nor defined, which perhaps cannot be defined nor measured by any of the symbols that mankind has created for this convenience. This is important what she says here. I read it one more time. As the totality of life is not limited to the visible, it is also not limited to the invisible. There seems to be a much vaster area of life, which has neither been described nor defined, which, perhaps, cannot be defined nor measured by any of the symbols that mankind has created for his convenience. If one desires to find out what is beyond the brain, beyond the mind, what does one do? There is no authority that can tell one. Even if we designated an authority and accepted its version, then that would not be a personal discovery. When we accept an authority and try to approximate our actions to the experiences and descriptions of that authority, we are comparing ourselves all the time. This temptation to conform to someone else's experiences prevents personal investigation. So one has to discover a non authoritarian way of investigating and exploring for oneself. It is most important to see that no one can condition the totality of life. Truth is greater than individuals. Truth, love, and freedom cannot be organized. If one mechanically repeats what others have done and is consoled by that, grafting the experiences of other people onto one's psyche, one is living second hand. And most of us live second hand lives when we live according to Hindu, Islamic, Christian, or Buddhist scriptures. Is there an alternative way of inquiring and investigating which does not begin from the acceptance of authority at all? If we are to use the mind, the brain, then it will be incumbent upon us to refer to some authority, because the mind cannot work without a symbol. It cannot function without a concept or an idea. It always translates reality in terms of some ideas or evaluations. If we inquire through the movement of mind, there is no possibility of freedom through mental movement. The movement of mind is the movement of the total human race. It is the movement of thought and knowledge. The mind is trained to qualify and quantify and modify the present, interpret it in terms of the past, and project it towards the future, which is useful on the material level. Retention of information in memory, or the reproduction of it elegantly and competently, is valuable. When we turn to relationships, where we have to deal with human beings, who are most unpredictable creatures, when we have to deal with nature, which cannot be imprisoned by any logical mathematics, when we have to turn our attention towards that which is beyond form and name and shape and color, even beyond the invisible, then this training has no relevance. Then this training of the mind has no relevance. If we are concerned with the religious revolution within us, if we are interested in really coming into personal, intimate touch with reality as it is, surely we do not want to indulge in any mechanical, repetitive behavior. And if the mind cannot move in any other groove than that of the known, it is not clear. Is it not clear that we might have to let the mind alone, to let it go into unconditional abeyance, to go spontaneously into effortless non action? We're going to explore together whether this spontaneous non action or abeyance of the mind is possible. There's not a technique or method. Authority cannot show the way to freedom, but we can explore together how it may be possible. It seems vitally necessary first to come into touch with the mechanism of mind, not hear about it only in discourses and lectures or read about it in books, but to observe the movement of mind in one's own life. Could we start by learning to observe? This is not taught in schools or even at home. We have created a civilization where we have to move with nearly inhuman speed, so there is no time to help ourselves or our children to become acquainted with their own being, to be introduced to the mechanism of mind, the chemistry of thought and emotion, to learn about mental health and such matters. We are so busy earning a livelihood, obtaining power, gaining experience, seeing the world, that these things are neglected. We have to see the necessity for a personal encounter with the mechanism of mind. Mind is not located in any specific part of the body. It is not like a kidney, liver, or pancreas. It is an energy contained in the brain, as well as perhaps woven into the whole neurological system of the body. It is constituted of thought, so has only a vibrational existence. Wow. When we come into contact with an object outside of ourselves, the sensation immediately stimulates the memory from which there is a response. Thoughts, feelings, sentiments, and emotions seem to be responses of memory. We have to watch how those responses come out of habit patterns, evaluations, and codes of conduct that one has accepted. See how they repeat themselves day after day. In order that this does not remain as information or an idea, one has to work upon oneself. While one walks, while one talks, cooks a meal, works in the office, or play games, just observe what happens to the quality of consciousness and how it reacts to the action and interaction. We saw yesterday that this observation is a reaction-free perception and that it is difficult for us. To sustain reaction-free attentiveness is quite an austere task. When we just observe and the contents of the mind are exposed, the images that we have gathered about ourselves begin to shatter. We have accepted the images formulated by our parents, teachers, and friends, and every day we continue to build on our own image, which preoccupies most of us. In this way, we perhaps find that we are a very religious or spiritual or gentle person. Everyone has an image. When observation discloses something contrary to the images that we have built or accepted about ourselves, there is pain. The ego feels hurt. The ego finds the exposure to reality so unpleasant that it resists the facts exposed by the observation and coils back in its shell. While learning to observe, we stumble upon this very important fact that we deal with images. As well as building our own image, we go on and build images about others. Perhaps you do something that pleases me, and immediately I create an image about you as a very pleasant person and expect you to act very pleasantly towards me all the time. If your behavior changes next day, there is a pain in my heart because the image that I built has been shattered. If your behavior is unpleasant, then there will be another image which will also be shattered. Such images cause us to expect people to continue behaving in the same way from one day to the next, but that does not happen. We like or dislike someone, the like crystallizes and becomes a preference, another image, and we insist that the other person conforms to our image. When that does not happen, there is the misery and pain of disappointment, disillusionment, as we call it. If one is interested in observing the movement of mind or of life, there must be no preoccupation with this image making. To inquire in a non authoritative way, one has to learn not only to observe, but also to stop building images. What does that imply? Where does that lead us? Can I meet you or live with the objects surrounding me in such a way that the action and interaction do not leave a residue in the mind? So, can I meet you or live with the objects surrounding me in such a way that the action and interaction do not leave a residue in the mind? An object gives me pleasure, and I have the sensitivity to register that pleasure quite normally. But do I step beyond this and say I would like to have the pleasure tomorrow also? Is it the thought of tomorrow that clings to the experience of pleasure and wants to continue it? Why are segments of experience gathered in memory to become a burden which inhibits further movement? Is it possible to go through the pain and pleasure at the moment of experience and finish with them there and then? You feel the pain, feel the pleasure, live through it thoroughly with the wholeness of one's being, with all the energy at one's command, and finish with it, so that there is no residue which would culminate in an image. A religious inquiry is quite an adventure, like climbing the mountains. As you climb and you take one more step, the view changes. You take one more step in religious inquiry and you see the light. You understand, and with that understanding, you proceed. Every step results in inner growth. That is the beauty of non authoritative investigation and inquiry. While learning to observe, we came across the hurdle of image making and discovered that it is the attachment to the sensation of pleasure and pain which obliges us to build an image. If there is not that attachment, and if there is the vitality to live every moment thoroughly and richly, whether it be pain, humiliation, honor, sorrow, joy, bliss, or love, whatever it is, then no residue is left. She says here, I read this paragraph one more time. While learning to observe, we came across the hurdle of image making and discovered that it is the attachment to the sensation of pleasure and pain which obliges us to build an image. If there is no attachment and if there is the vitality to live every moment thoroughly and richly, whether it be pain, humiliation, honor, sorrow, joy, bliss, or love, whatever it is, then no residue will be left. How does one live so thoroughly and with the wholeness of one's being? How does one live so thoroughly and with the wholeness of one's being? One has to be totally present in each moment, in each relationship, not partially here and partially elsewhere. If you are preoccupied or upset, you cannot live with the wholeness of your being. If we go absent-mindedly through events and experiences, certain undigested, unnoticed impressions are left behind, which move into the subconscious and lie there to be projected in dreams, intimations, and so on. One has to be attentive, alert, and sensitive in order to pour one's whole being into each moment of life, each movement of life. One needs to do that because what we call the present may be the only eternity. It may be the totality of life condensed in this moment. Either you meet the moment in what you call the present, or you miss the opportunity of meeting the moment. It cannot be repeated. Life does not repeat itself. That is the only opportunity to meet life, to let it lift its veil and reveal itself to us. It can reveal itself if there is receptivity, alertness, and sensitivity. I started learning to observe, learning to be in a state of reaction free attentiveness, and I came across these hurdles one by one. When I'm just sitting with myself and looking at the movement of life, life itself begins to teach. I wish I could share with you the beauty of such an encounter, the dialogue with life, and the beauty of the virgin revelations that occur. If and when one goes through such hurdles and observes the movement of mind, one notices at once that it is mechanistic and repetitive. It is tethered to the past. There is no freedom through the mental movement and thought. The movement of mind is really the effort of the past to perpetuate itself and manifest through you. This discovery of the repetitive and mechanical movement of the mind, the organic built-in limitations of the mental movement, can bring a person to utter despair. Then one wonders whether, if the mental movement is of no use, one is doomed to live without freedom. For thousands of years it has been impressed on us that the divine can be reached through the mind, that transformation can be an experience of the mind, an enlightenment, an attainment of the mind. Naively we have believed this, but on inquiring, however, we find that such experience would be repetition, and one is not interested in repetition. Then one realizes that it is no use moving through the mind. One has observed what the mind is and how it moves. One has to let mental activity go altogether and relax into an innocent non action in order to explore without the conditioned mind. To let the mind go means to let go the whole of the known, and one trembles at the idea of letting go of the I. When the I does not move, what will happen to me? If I allow the me to go into abeyance, there will be no way of finding out where I am. One wants security and thinks that there must be some teacher who will explain how to reach reality, how to understand what is beyond mind and brain, with the help of that very mind and brain. There must be some method, some technique. The urge for security does not allow one to relax into the innocence of not knowing and say, I don't know how to proceed. I only know of mental ways and there are no paths to freedom. Just to say to oneself, I do not know where or how to move, so I shall stay where I am without mental effort in any direction, neither of knowledge and experience, nor of extrasensory perception, nor of transcendental, astral, or occult experiences. One unconditionally refuses the network of traps of mental effort. I'd like to finish this chapter, so I will read a little longer than normally. It's two more pages. To let go of that bondage of the known is very difficult. If we are attached to the known and feel secure in it, obviously we shall not let it go, even though there is an intellectual ambition to find out what is the unknown, or if there is the unknowable. You cannot be in the Earth's orbit and land on the moon. The orbit of the Earth has to be left behind, in the same way as the security of the known has to be relinquished at some point for the discovery of the other, yet one hesitates to do that. We would not be searching unless we felt that there is this other, the non-verbalized. We go as far as words can take us, and then we are held up with the fear of letting the mind go completely. Unconditional relaxation is absolutely necessary. People believe that sitting in silence for so many hours a day or going into a state of meditation and that they will achieve something. But these are a means to an end. One does not relax completely. In the depth of the mind is the waiting for something to happen. There is a suspense. Silence becomes an experience of the mind, not a different dimension. When silence is free of verbalization, free of conditioning, there is a totally different dimension, something marvelous. If there is no urge for security or fear of freedom, if there is no fear of life or death, then one lets the mind go completely. We have to live on these two different dimensions. Unconditional and total relaxation means there is no pressure on the body chemistry, no tension on the neurological system. This is the substance of relaxation or silence. You can simulate that state of relaxation through drugs or by using certain techniques, like the multitudes of yogas, but total relaxation of the mind means that you are no longer operating from a fragment or part of your being. You're back in the wholeness of your being. To be relaxed is to be back home. You are the whole. So we set out to learn to observe. While we observed, we were helped or induced to relax by the understanding of the inbuilt limitations of the mind. One sees here that a non-authoritative way can itself become a teacher and help us to take one step after another. It will not happen in the life of everyone in the same order as I describe, but I'm trying to share how a non-authoritative inquiry can take place. The wholeness is very holy. Fragmentation is not holy. That wholeness has concealed in it innumerable healing forces and blessings. When one allows that relaxation to occur, the healing forces contained in the earth and the sky, the trees, the sun rays and moon rays, the healing forces in our own bodies are released in its totality. As the body is rejuvenated in deep sleep, so it is revitalized in that state of relaxation. Unconditioned energies, which have no past whatever, are activated and released in the state of silence. Not me, the brain, but the other, the unconditioned, begins to operate and give quite a different perspective of life. It seems vitally necessary that a non-mental, non-cerebral exploration be undertaken in order to find out if there is anything beyond the known and the unknown. To be in that state of total relaxation could be called being in meditation. Meditation is a state of being where the individual, conditioned mind goes into abeyance. There is total relaxation in the whole being, and it is then only the wholeness that operates through the eyes, the ears, through words. It is quite a different dimension, a state of being, rather than a psychophysical activity. It is in that state of meditation, of unconditional emptiness, that the other, the unnameable, the immeasurable, the infinite, the eternal, the divine, reveals itself. It is not for us to conquer it, to dictate terms to it. When the conditioned mind ceases to move and the unconditioned energies are released, then there is the perception of the other, the infinite, through an awareness which is intelligence, an awareness that perception itself is contact, and the understanding resulting from such a perception is relationship. Yesterday, We saw how one equips one's senses to perceive the visible and move into proper relationship with it. We also saw that it was possible to relate with the unknown, the invisible, through the mind and the brain. This morning, we have proceeded further. We have seen that in order to find out what is beyond the visible, beyond the brain, the known and the experienced, it is absolutely necessary first to observe the mechanism of the mind and then to let it go. In the vulnerability and insecurity of that unconditioned silence, revelations can take place. And this is the end of the second talk. So I wish you a really good day. Bye for now.